The first thing I remember about my sister's wedding is the smell. Hairspray, champagne, lilies wilting under hot lights. Everyone kept saying it was perfect. I kept thinking it felt staged, like a movie set where the walls were thin and the smiles were props. I almost didn't go. I stood in front of the mirror in the hotel room, smoothing the dress I'd borrowed from a coworker because I couldn't justify buying one for a family that barely spoke to me. My phone buzzed on the counter, a text from my mother. "Try not to make today about you." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. That sentence had followed me my whole life, like a leash. Don't make it about you. Don't embarrass us. Don't react. Don't cry. Don't talk back. Don't exist too loudly. I went anyway. The venue was a restored barn outside the city, all white wood and fairy lights, pretending to be rustic while costing more than my annual salary. Guests floated around in linen and pastel dresses, laughing too loudly, hugging too long. When they saw me, the laughter dipped just a notch. Not silence, just enough. My sister barely looked at me when I congratulated her. "Thanks for coming," she said, already turning away, already calling someone else's name. My father was at the bar. He looked the same as always, broad shoulders, jaw set like he was permanently bracing for impact. He nodded once when he saw me, like you'd acknowledge a stranger who looked vaguely familiar. I told myself to stay invisible. Sit, smile, leave early. That plan lasted about an hour. It happened during the reception, after the speeches, when the alcohol had softened everyone's edges, except his. I was standing near the back, talking to my cousin, when I felt him behind me. I didn't hear him approach. I felt it in my spine first, that old electric awareness. "You think you can just show up?" he said, quietly. I turned. I was invited. His eyes flicked around the room. Music, laughter, cameras everywhere. "You always do this," he said. "You wait for an audience." "I'm not doing anything," I said. My heart was already pounding. "You're ruining her day," he snapped. I laughed because sometimes your body betrays you in the worst ways. "I've been standing here." He leaned closer. I could smell whiskey on his breath. "You're embarrassing us." There it was again. I don't know what I said next. I wish I did. Maybe if I could remember it, I could convince myself I deserved what came after. All I know is that his hand was suddenly on my arm, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "Let go," I said. Someone nearby laughed at a joke. A fork clinked against a plate. "Don't tell me to do that," he hissed. And then everything went fast. He shoved me backward, hard. My shoulder hit the wall behind me, the impact knocking the air out of my lungs. For a second, all I could see were lights, white, exploding. I heard gasps. Someone screamed my name. He was in my face, one hand flat against my chest, pinning me there like I was something dangerous that needed to be contained. "You don't get to disrespect me," he said. I slid down the wall and hit the floor. The music didn't stop right away. I remember thinking absurdly that my sister had chosen this song herself, that this was the moment she'd play back in her head for the rest of her life. Then someone yelled, "Hey, what the hell?" Hands pulled him back. I felt someone kneel beside me. "Are you okay?" a woman asked, her voice shaking. My father straightened his jacket like he'd just bumped into a table. "She's being dramatic. She always does this." My ears were ringing. My shoulder burned. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't get a full breath. I looked up and saw phones. Not just one, several, held halfway up, uncertain, recording anyway. My sister stood frozen near the head table, bouquet still in her hands. She didn't come toward me. She didn't say my name. She just stared, like she was watching a scene she hoped someone else would handle. Security escorted him outside. I was taken to a quiet room, ice pressed to my shoulder, a stranger's cardigan draped around me. My mother came in long enough to say, "Can you please not call the police?" and then left again. I went home early. I didn't know the video existed until the next morning. I woke up to my phone vibrating non-stop. Missed calls, messages, notifications from platforms I barely used. One text stood out, from a coworker. "Is this you?" There was a link. I clicked it. The clip was shaky, filmed from across the room. You could hear laughter, then raised voices, then the moment my body hit the wall. Someone zoomed in right as I slid down, right as my father loomed over me, his face twisted with something raw and ugly. The caption read, "Bride's father assaults daughter at wedding." When I refreshed the page, it had 300,000 views. By noon, it crossed 1 million. By the time the sun went down, it was at 5. I sat on my couch, ice melting into a towel on my shoulder, watching strangers argue about my life in the comments. Some called me a liar, some called him a monster, some recognized him, some recognized me. My phone rang. It was my father. I didn't answer. I didn't answer his calls. Not the first one, not the next 6. I turned the phone face down on the countertop like it might bite me if I looked at it too long. Instead, I watched the numbers climb. 5 million turned into 6, 6 into 8. Someone reposted it on another platform with a slowed-down zoom on the exact moment my back hit the wall. Another version added captions. "She didn't fight back. Look at her freeze." Someone stitched it with commentary, pointing out the way my father's hand stayed on my chest a beat too long, a beat that felt like a lifetime when you were inside it. My body ached in places adrenaline had hidden the night before. Purple bloomed along my arm where his fingers had dug in. When I lifted my shirt to check my shoulder in the mirror, I had to sit down. Seeing it made it real in a way the video hadn't. The internet could argue all it wanted. My body knew the truth. By afternoon, my boss called. "I just want you to know," she said carefully, "you don't need to come in today, or tomorrow, or next week." "I can work," I said automatically. "I know, but I'd rather you didn't." That was when it hit me that this wasn't just something happening online. It was bleeding into everything. My job, my name, the way people would look at me when I walked into a room from now on. A knock came at my door, just after sunset. I froze. Another knock, firmer. I padded over quietly, heart hammering, and checked through the peephole. My sister. She looked different without the wedding makeup. Smaller, eyes red, still wearing the ring like armor. I opened the door just enough to stand between her and the inside of my apartment. "What do you want?" I asked. She exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding it in the whole drive over. "You couldn't just let one day go by," she said. I stared at her. "He slammed me into a wall." "You didn't have to make it public," she snapped. I laughed because sometimes your body betrays you in the worst ways. "I've been standing here." She leaned closer. I could smell whiskey on his breath. "He's losing everything," she whispered. "His job, his reputation, people are calling the house." "He did this," I said. "He's still our father." The word "our" landed between us like a challenge. "Where were you when it happened?" I asked, quietly. "It was my wedding. I was your sister." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. She never cried when it mattered. "If you press charges," she said, "it will destroy him." I held the door. "He destroyed this a long time ago." She left without hugging me, without apologizing. The hallway light flicked off after her, plunging everything back into shadow. That night, a reporter emailed me, then another, then a producer from a morning show. My inbox filled with subject lines that all felt wrong sitting next to my name. Exclusive interview request, your side of the story, public reaction to viral wedding video. I didn't respond, but someone else did. A message popped up on my screen from an account with no photo and no posts. "You think the internet knows him? You don't know him." My stomach dropped. Another message followed before I could block it. "Delete the video, or I'll tell them what you did." I stared at the words until they blurred. What I did. I thought about the years I'd spent protecting him without realizing that's what I was doing. The silence, the excuses, the way I learned to flinch before a hand ever moved. My phone buzzed again. This time a call from a number I hadn't seen in over a decade. My mother. I let it ring. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, fading in and out like a reminder that life kept moving whether I was ready or not. The video was still climbing, and whatever my family thought they could bury along with it was starting to claw its way back to the surface.
I didn't upload anything that night.
I sat at my kitchen table with the laptop open, the folder glowing on the screen like it was breathing. Each file name was a year. Each year was a version of me that had learned how to survive by being quiet. I kept hearing his voice in my head, low and certain, telling me no one would believe me, telling me I'd ruin everything if I talked. Outside, my phone kept buzzing. 10 million became 12. 12 became 15. Someone found my father's workplace and tagged them. Someone dug up an old newspaper photo of him shaking hands with a local official. Someone else stitched the wedding video next to a clip of him giving a talk years ago about family values. The comments were a war zone. I wasn't reading them anymore. I was watching the clock. At 7:42 a.m., my phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my chest said this one mattered. "Ms. Harris?" a man asked. "This is Detective Lowell. I'd like to ask you a few questions about an incident that occurred this weekend." I closed my eyes. "Okay." "We've received multiple reports," he continued, "and a copy of the video." I pictured my sister's bouquet slipping from her fingers, the way my mother had asked me not to call the police. "I didn't file anything," I said. "You don't have to, but we'd like to document injuries and hear your account." After the call, I stood in the shower longer than necessary, letting the water pound against my shoulder until it ached. I thought about how many times I'd cleaned myself after crying, trying to wash off something invisible. This time felt different. This time the ache wasn't just mine. When I got out, there were 3 missed calls from my sister. I answered the 4th. "You can't do this," she said immediately. Her voice was tight, brittle. "They're talking about charges." "I didn't call the police," I said, "but you're letting it happen." I wrapped a towel around myself and sat on the edge of the bed. This was always going to happen. "He's not a monster," she insisted. "He's sick. He needs help." He needed help when I was 12, when I was 16, when he shoved me into a wall in front of 200 people. She was quiet for a moment. "If you release anything else," she said, "there's no coming back." I thought of the folder on my laptop, the years, the silence. "There was no coming back," I said. "There was just pretending." She hung up. By noon, the detective arrived. He was calm, professional. He didn't rush me. He photographed the bruises, asked me to describe what happened in my own words. When I finished, my hands were shaking, but my voice hadn't broken. That felt like a small victory. After he left, I sat back down at the table. I opened one file. Not the worst one, not the one that would make people gasp, just enough. A screenshot of a text my father had sent years ago apologizing for losing control, asking me not to tell my mother because she wouldn't understand. I stared at it for a long time. Then I uploaded it. No caption, no explanation, just the image. The internet did the rest. My phone exploded. Reporters, advocates, strangers telling me they believed me. Others telling me I was destroying a man's life.
The morning
My mother
after
texted
everything detonated, I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, the heavy, waiting kind, like the air itself was holding its breath. My phone was dead, completely. I'd fallen asleep with it in my hand and somehow missed the charger. For a few seconds, there was a twisted relief in that. No notifications, no opinions, no threats dressed up as concern. Then I plugged it in. It came back to life like it had been underwater too long. Missed calls stacked on missed calls, voicemails, emails, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, and people I'd never met at all. Someone from my high school, someone from my old job, someone who said, "I don't know you, but I know him, and I'm sorry." That one sat with me. I didn't listen to the voicemails yet. I couldn't. I made coffee instead, hands shaking so badly I spilled grounds on the counter and didn't bother cleaning them up. I stood there, staring at the mess, thinking about how many times in my life I'd been expected to clean up someone else's damage. There was a knock at my door. Soft, careful, like whoever it was already knew they weren't welcome. I didn't answer. Another knock. "It's me," my mother said through the door. Her voice sounded small, worn down. I stayed where I was. "I told you not to come." "I know," she said. I needed to see you." "You've seen me," I said. "You saw me on the floor." Silence stretched between us. Then, "Your father's been suspended, pending investigation." I closed my eyes. I hadn't known what I was hoping to feel when that happened. Relief didn't come. Neither did satisfaction. Just a dull, echoing quiet where fear used to live. She added, "He keeps asking what he did." I walked to the door, but didn't open it. "He always remembers enough to blame me." She didn't argue. "I should have protected you," she said finally. The words hit harder than any shove, not because they healed anything, but because they came so late. "I needed you to," I said. Her breath hitched on the other side of the door. "What do you want now?" I thought about that. Really thought about it. The interviews waiting, the case unfolding, the internet that had already decided who everyone was. "I want space," I said. "And I want you to stop asking me to make this easier for everyone else." She nodded, even though I couldn't see it. "Okay." Her footsteps faded down the hall. Later that day, my lawyer called, then a producer, then another. I turned them all down, not because I was protecting him, but because I was protecting myself. I needed time to exist without explaining my pain to strangers like it was a product. That evening, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, scrolling through messages I hadn't opened yet. One stopped me cold. A woman I didn't know had written, "I was at your wedding. I didn't know you. I didn't step in. I'm sorry. I see it now." I stared at that one for a long time, because it meant the silence around him was breaking, not just online, in real rooms, in real memories. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't my family. It wasn't the media. It was a message from someone who knew my father long before I did. "If you ever want to know the truth about him, I'm ready to talk." I set the phone down slowly, heart pounding. There were still things I didn't know, stories that had been protected by the same silence that had trapped me for years. And for the first time since the wedding, I realized this wasn't just about what the world had seen. It was about what it was finally willing to hear.